Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to Profiling Evil Live. Tonight, we're going to be talking a little bit about the Alex Murdaugh trial and some of the things that have been going on in the last 3 weeks. I wanted to keep this like an open mic tonight. So if you want to call in, I want you to I'm going to post this up right now. Here's the link. You can come in at any time and we'll just chat and see what you have to say and talk about this case a little bit. Hey, April Stolth, hi there. As of right now, I believe this man killed his wife and son. So it's going to take a lot to change April's mind. Let's see what the rest of you think. Wendy Henschel, great to see you. Mountain Granny, L444, Mel Stiller, good to see you here. Southern Sass, great to see you here. Mel's up in British Columbia. So, yeah, I hope you're all doing well. We're on the mend from the COVID side of things here at our house. We're slowly working our way back. Crystal McCormick, how are you? Great to see you. I've watched the trial coverage, and it is real bad. It is bad in a number of ways, isn't it? Sandra, how you doing? Jessica Texan, great to see you. Michelle Morris, good to see you here out in West Texas calling in. Nancy Alexander, holy cow, batch of you coming in, and you know what? We're gonna just do whatever we want tonight. We're gonna play a little bit of video. We're gonna talk a little bit. I'm gonna try to watch the comments and have some communication, and we'll see where this thing takes us tonight. Again, I don't know about you. I've been doing a ton of media on this one for some reason. I've been on Court TV a batch of times. I've been on News Nation. I've been on Nancy Grace. I don't know why so many people are so frustrated with Nancy. I mean, she's pretty direct, and sometimes she yells at me, and I yell back in the way I yell, which is like right now I'm yelling for those of you who don't know me. Diane Phoenix, good to see you. I think I said hi. Janice from Oz is here. Anyway, so put up a poll. I don't know how to do that. So we're going to have you weighing in here. And I hope you'll hit the like and subscribe button and give the thumbs up and all that as we start talking. I've recorded some things, and then the rest I just wanted to talk. So I'm using the recording kind of as a way to get us started on things, and then we'll just chat. So I like this area there yet. Are we there yet? I like that. Hi, Mike from Kelly Joe in Central Illinois. Thanks for the comprehensive but not inflammatory coverage of these cases. I really hope that's the case, and thank you so much, because I consider that a compliment. I just have such faith in you all to be able to sort out in your own mind what makes sense and what doesn't. And tonight, I want you to look at it as if you were a juror for the last 3 weeks. Where would you be weighing things right now? And frankly, things are going to get a whole lot different on this one. Artificial Ghost shouting in from Australia. Good day. It's middle of the day there, so hopefully you're just settling into your lunch, and actually maybe it's about, I don't know, 1 to 2 o'clock in the afternoon, based on where you are. So anyway, let's get started. We'll come back. We'll keep talking. Again, I'm going to post that one more time here. If you decide you want to come in and chat for a minute, we'll keep it right on target, talk a little bit about what's going on, and maybe our Profiling Evil counsel will come on as well, especially if I get us off base, Michelle. So make sure you're keeping me straight. So Susan Schroeder, great to see you from Gainesville. So let's jump in and start watching this. So the prosecution rested in the Alex Murdaugh case, and now the fireworks are set to begin as the defense returns from the President's Day holiday to convince at least one juror that their client didn't commit homicide. No, that's right, didn't commit the murder of Maggie and Paul Murdaugh. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to Profiling Evil in this special edition on the Alex Murdaugh murder. Now, Murdaugh is accused of killing his wife, Maggie, and their son, Paul, on the family estate. And if you've been watching this one, you've been blown away by the twists and turns in the case. I mean, whether it's cousin Eddie or it's those arranged attempts on Murdaugh's life. The fact that Murdaugh says he was nowhere near the house when this murder occurred. All of these big lies are coming back to haunt him time. Hey, I want to stop right there for a moment because, Carol, I think you've asked a question that a lot of people have asked, or you've expressed an opinion that a lot of people have ventured out. And I want to know how you all feel about this very question. Could he have done this murder alone? And as you start to weigh in, I'm going to just give you my opinion on why I think he absolutely could have committed this murder. Now, frankly, I'm going to tip my hand a little bit that I think from a behavioral perspective that his primary target was Maggie. I wonder if he intended on, if in fact, and all of this is speculative based on whether or not we believe that Alex Murdaugh is the killer. But I think that the focus on Maggie was so direct, so intense, and with a rifle that could have given him the ability to hide a little bit further away. But then the shots get pretty darn specific. And we start to see a change in the stippling or the burning from gunshot residue. But I think Maggie was the primary target, and I think Paul stumbled into this thing and was number 2 in line just to clean up business. But I might be completely wrong, and gosh, I don't know, but I do think it's absolutely possible that an individual could have done this by themselves. Now, does it mean that 2 people couldn't have done it, or even more? That crazy cousin Eddie could have been involved, or something else? I think all of that will shake out as this thing unfolds. But you know what? It's really hard to keep a secret when there are 2 people. When there's one, it's a whole lot easier. And I think this one is going to boil down to exactly where the prosecution's taking it. So let's pop back in. Time again. And what's the biggest lie? I think it's Murdaugh's claim that he wasn't there, because forensics seems to be proving that Murdaugh could have killed his son and his wife. In fact, in my opinion, the evidence keeps piling on. Now, some of you have expressed concern that this is a circumstantial case. There's no confession in it. You know, there are many cases that are prosecuted without a confession being made. At least we've got bodies in this one. I mean, think about Suzanne Morphew, or maybe a better thing to think about is the 500 plus murder cases where the body was never found and people have been convicted on the case. So this isn't that concerning to me. In fact, the case seems stronger to me because of all of the other forms of evidence that are coming into play. I mean, we've seen powerful forensic and physical evidence talked about. We've seen DNA, blood transfers. We've had multiple stories about his alibi that continues to change. I mean, almost daily. The more information that comes out, the more changes Murdaugh seemed to have made during his 3 interviews with police. So, folks, I hope you'll take a moment, that you're taking time to hit that like and subscribe button and ring the bell so that you get all of the notifications when we release a video. Now, let's look at this Murdaugh case a little. So let's just pause here for a second. So I think this is great. I think Crystal says, I think it's the other way around. Crystal thinks that maybe Paul was the initial target and then Maggie. And Crystal, man, if you feel comfortable, pop in for a minute. Let's chat online and kind of sort this out. And I'd love to hear your reasoning behind that. The reason I think is number one, the amount of shots that Maggie took. That could have been a much more surgical murder by being able to have some distance because of that 300 blackout rifle. And for those of you that don't know what the 300 blackout rifle is, it's kind of like an AR-15 style rifle that can feed multiple rounds without having to manually eject rounds and move forward. The thing that's so interesting to me, and the reason I say it, Crystal, and I'd love to have you again call in if you feel comfortable doing that, but if not, maybe make a comment here or two. But this is the other reason why. Not only is it surgical, and she was shot 5 times, twice in the head. I think that's really significant from a behavioral perspective. And you know me, I spend a ton of time talking behavior. But here's reason number 2 is that a shotgun on a moving target is much easier, and that a shotgun was something that they were packing around in there as well. I thought it was really interesting that there were both large pellet and small pellet rounds in Paul, and that in some cases, Alec even kind of hinted toward it, that he had actually loaded rounds where he put those bigger pellets in and then filled with smaller birdshot in and around. It's actually a technique that was used by a lot of people back in I don't know, the 70s and 80s. My family, we loaded shotgun rounds ourselves all the time. We experimented with all kinds of rounds. Now, we never got as crazy as trying to put slugs and BBs or larger pellets in the same round, but we certainly did put a few bigger buckshot pieces in with a bunch of different shot, depending on the kind of game we were going after, because it gave you a longer reach. It also gave you a bigger coverage by more of those smaller pellets going out, which could cripple an animal where you could then finish it off. And that's really kind of brutal to talk about in that way. But that's kind of my thinking behind that. Now, is it possible that it was the other way around? Absolutely. Again, I just go back to that rifle though, because that just kind of seems a little more strategic, a little more able to do from a distance. And again, the biggest thing I'm focusing on is Maggie was shot 5 times, and I just think there was a lot of personal rage in that. There are lots of reasons, and I got to admit up front, I kind of got sucked in on Fox one night with a mindset that maybe that Maggie had talked to a divorce attorney had come out in the trial. I don't think that's correct, although I've never been able to validate that it is or is not, because there's so much that happened in the courtroom that hasn't made it onto TV. There's so much evidence that has been shown in the courtroom that we're only seeing scrubbed and delivered later. But who knows? So let's see what else people are talking about here. This is interesting. Peach PI. Now that might be somebody from down in Georgia or something. I don't know, or whatever. Yes, 2 guns were to confuse, just like multiple ammo in the guns. And yeah, I don't know if the multiple ammo personally, again, because I'm going back to my own childhood, my own teens and young 20s, when we were loading shotgun rounds on our own. We did whatever was kind of seemed to make good sense. And again, we never mixed a slug. That's that big solid piece of lead that comes out with shot, because just with so much compression on the barrel or so much pressure on that barrel. But we did mix buckshot and birdshot on a regular basis. So, hey, we're going to pause for a sec. I'm going to bring in Crystal. We're going to have her back up her theories. So, Crystal, how you doing? Thanks for taking a minute.
I'm doing fabulous. Better question is, how are you?
I'm doing well. It's just my wife that had COVID. I thankfully have dodged the bullet one more time. So we'll see. So tell me, why do you think Paul first out and Maggie second?
Well, Paul is the younger, more spry, is kind of what I'm thinking. He went down there, and I think after he shot Paul, Maggie heard the shots because it was later in the, like 9:30 or something. And I think she heard it and ran down there. And that's when he was like,
Well,
uh-oh.
you might be right. Now, the interesting thing is some people have argued that Paul, because of the boating accident, had really riled up Alec because he was fixing on losing a batch of money.
Yep.
Could be. Again, I think just as much that's a possibility. Again, I go back to the behavior and the probability.
Right.
And I don't know that we'll ever know the answer unless the killer someday comes straight with it. But I am so proud of you for coming on and backing yourself up. Anything else you want to chat about real quickly?
Gosh, have you followed the trial at all? Have you heard any of the other things that's going on?
I've been watching the trial nonstop because I've been on Fox or Nancy Grace or Court TV almost every night. So, and yet I'm still trying to do my day job. So at night I binge watch on whatever happened during the day, and I don't watch the entire trial because I still have to work a job. But I don't know. Okay, well, Crystal, thanks so much. It is awesome to see you, and thanks for all your support of Profiling Evil.
Anytime, Mike. Take care.
And I'm going to bring in, if I see his camera pop on here in a second, I'm going to bring in one of my old investigative buddies. We're gonna chat here because I think he's got something to say. Well, he always has something to say, so we'll see what comes out of this. But Crystal, thanks.
Take care.
That's awesome. So I'm gonna let's see. I'm going to bring in, I don't know, I'm not seeing his image here, so I'm going to give him 1 second. Maybe he's just on his phone. Captain Ray Kelly, former investigator for the Suffolk County Police Department. He and I have known each other for a long time. Ray, can you hear me? So I'm not getting anything there. So Ray, you're going to need to call back and let's see if we can get your video and your audio working on this one. So let's see if there's anything else here before we go on. There was a $5 super chat I saw pop up, and I apologize. I was so enthralled in the discussion that I kind of missed it. Knight Rider, anyone not finding it interesting that he comes back to Moselle and never texts, "Where are you guys?" but goes directly to the kennels? You know what I find? We're going to talk about it a little more in a second when I jump back into this, but I find it interesting that everybody has recordings of phone calls or texts from Alec, but all of them were wiped off of his phone that night. But Knight Rider, thanks for that kind donation. Really appreciate it. Let's jump back into this. A little closer from the prosecution's standpoint as they wrapped up their case yesterday. As we review everything we've learned in the last 3 weeks, we've got to keep in mind and keep this in perspective that it's the prosecution's opinion that we've heard thus far. And the prosecution believes that Alex Murdaugh killed his wife Maggie and Paul, which means that we have to keep in mind that things are going to look and sound a whole lot different next week when the defense team comes out swinging in this case. And I mean swinging, because I think if we've seen anything, we've seen how aggressive this defense team is. At times, it seems like they've been attacking witnesses that are on the stand. It's going to be really interesting to see how they respond when they're the one putting a witness up and having to have the prosecution do the cross exams. And remember, the defense only has to convince one juror in the state of South Carolina. Only one has to be convinced that maybe, did you notice I said maybe, that maybe Murdaugh didn't commit these murders. Rule 48, if I'm reading it correctly, states that the jury shall be composed of 12 persons and their verdict must be unanimous. Now, I've read other news reports that say in this case it also must be unanimous, so I'm going with that. So I'm going to pause there for a second. I'm going to bring in my buddy Ray Kelly. How you doing, brother?
Hey, Mike. Good to see you.
Good to see you. You know, we're just talking about the fact that if I'm reading the law right, and that this is going to require 100% of that jury to say guilty in order to convict Alex Murdaugh. which is really important, folks, because again, like I was kind of talking about there, this thing is something. You think about the jury selection process in a case like this. They started out with over 900 names on that potential juror list. Through a process, they narrowed that down to 150, and then they did some backroom discussion, got it down to 122 before they started actually chatting about who does what and how they feel about certain things before they finally get it down to 12. And out of that 12, all 12 have to say guilty in order for this guy to be found guilty. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I know. That's the system that we have, and it's a good system. All in all, it's a good system. But there's so much evidence in this case that I know about. We don't know it all, but there's no doubt he was the number one suspect when I first heard about these murders. Yeah.
Yeah, this one's
think
really going to
convicted. He'll be convicted, no doubt in my mind.
This is really going to be interesting. Well, I thought I had about a couple of cases and got surprised. So I'm going to hang in there and continue to watch, because now the defense gets to muddy the water for a week or so. And muddy they will, and we're going to talk a little more about that in a minute. But since I got you on, I want to just mention to everybody. Now, Ray and I have talked about Dennis Wustenhoff for years. And folks, if you haven't had an opportunity to watch my videos on the murder of Detective Dennis Wustenhoff, this is a former detective that Ray worked with many years ago. This week, 33 years ago, just for those of you who, I hope it'll encourage you to go back and watch my video on this, but 33 years ago on Valentine's night, Dennis Wustenhoff, who's working undercover narcotics in New York, and this is just east of New York City, folks, for you, those of you geographically challenged, Dennis decides to take the night off to take his little girl to the daddy-daughter dance on Valentine's Day. And Ray, I don't know how many times we've talked to the kids. It is really hard to not get emotional every time I think of that. Because what happened the next morning when he went out to start his car and go to work, Ray?
I know. Somebody had placed a bomb in his undercover car. And when he started it, it blew up. And obviously, he died 3 hours later. And there's a prime suspect in that case, too. We all know he did it. But the DA that was there at the time and the DAs that have followed are so afraid of the conviction being overturned on appeal, they don't want to prosecute it. And that's not what justice is all about. I mean, if you got a suspect, especially a murder suspect, and there's so much circumstantial evidence, the suspect should be prosecuted.
There you go.
He should be arrested.
Well, this week, on the 33rd anniversary of this homicide, Dennis's family, who has kept his story alive, and Ray and I know them personally, folks. I mean, these are people that I was lucky enough to convince Dr. Phil to do a show on Dennis's murder, and for the first time in 30 years, got Dennis's widow to come on national TV, worldwide TV, and talk about that day and what happened. The girls to talk about it. Dennis's son, who now wears his badge, and Fran, the wife to Dennis, stepped up and added $35,000 to the reward for the
$100,000 now. Yeah,
$100,000.
Right.
So, folks,
and again, the DA probably just needs that one little bit of information that'll give him the courage to prosecute the case. I firmly believe the new DA, Ray Tierney, the Suffolk DA, should have authorized the arrest already. I firmly believe that. I speak about it quite often, and hopefully he's listening and something will be done.
Between you and me, we'll keep pounding the drum, and I know that those kids are not going to let this thing rest. And so, folks, if you get a chance, go to the Dennis Wustenhoff Facebook page and make sure you go over to Profiling Evil in our content page and look up the videos on Wustenhoff, Wustenhoff, and watch that video. But Ray,
Mike,
thanks for.
I have to say thank you to you. You know, you really featured this case many times on your podcast, and you were very instrumental in getting it on Dr. Phil. And I know I appreciate it, and the family appreciates it.
Oh, you are so kind. I don't know if you caught my video I sent to the kids last week, but I was in Washington, D.C. working, and I never go without stopping and visiting some old friends at the police memorial. And
I know.
And it's always special to call the kids and let them know their dad's still okay. There we go.
Right there.
That is fantastic. Well, Captain Ray Kelly, make sure you sign up for his YouTube channel. If you want to know anything about drones, go on there. And Ray, thanks for dropping in tonight. I'm going to jump back into this thing.
Thanks.
We'll see you later.
All right. Have a good night, everybody.
Think about what has to happen in order for that to come out as a unanimous verdict. Every member of that jury has to agree, nope, the evidence supports that Alex Murdaugh killed his wife and his son. Still a big, big challenge ahead of the prosecution. But let's talk for just a moment about what it took to get to this point. I don't know if you are remembering this or if you even knew it, but in the beginning, there were more than 900 prospective jurors that the judge and the court officers had to choose from. Now, that number was pretty quickly narrowed down to about 150 jurors who, after some questioning in open court, were whittled down to about 122 jurors. Now, at that point, the court officers went to work on trying to isolate and get rid of people that they didn't want on the jury and those that they wanted to keep on the jury. It was during that time also that there were a few in the judge's chamber discussions that actually got rid of even more. So they finally whittled it down to 12 people, plus I think it was 4 additional jurors to stand in case something went wrong. And what could go wrong, right? Well, it happened. Last week, 2 of the jurors ended up testing positive with COVID and were removed from the courtroom, meaning that now that pool of extras, that pool of backup, is now down to 2 as this trial continues, because the judge wasn't about to postpone the trial. So the alternates are now in position. 2 alternates, I believe, are left. Now, let's look at the actual timeline as it's been discussed in court. And there are so many timeline issues that I want to just kind of lump them into some groups to kind of get us through it a little quicker. So I want to just pause there for a second. Love all of the comments that are streaming in. Man, you guys are going 100 miles an hour tonight. Jen Lowe, thank you so much. Yeah, folks, there's almost 2,000 people watching tonight. I'd sure appreciate if you give some thumbs up, and please subscribe if you're new to Profiling Evil. We'd love to have you join up and be a part of what we do here. And you know what? Yeah, I think this is interesting because we're seeing the jury pool get a little thinner, and we're only halfway through if all the numbers are looking correctly. So we'll see. Dragonfly Lady says, in her opinion, the prosecution didn't do a good job of putting the picture together for the jury. This is kind of an interesting thing, Dragonfly Lady, because the prosecution is in a really interesting position. Number one, I thought it was really interesting how they put this information out. And frankly, when the OnStar data became available at the last minute in the 11th hour of the prosecution's case, I thought, holy cow, what an impressive add-on to their case that was. But this is something that's always really difficult in these criminal cases, is actually not building the watch, but helping people just understand what time it is. And I think we all, in our own individual professions, are really guilty of this, where we want to tell people all of the intricate pieces in and behind the scenes, instead of people just understanding, hey, Alex Murdaugh happened to put his car into drive at Moselle at the home and drive to his mother's house. And by the way, he made it between point A and point B so fast that he couldn't have been following the speed limit. Now we know with OnStar data that he was actually traveling speeds of 75 to 80 miles an hour on 55-mile-an-hour roads. But that's how you and I would think about it. But we got to remember that the judge is requiring that all of the legal pieces be put into place. And maybe our friend Michelle Morris will hop on to kind of talk about that, because it is such a fine line between doing all the nerdy legal stuff that has to be done in order to check the boxes and keep this thing together, but also make it simple enough that you and I can sit back and say, oh man, I'm starting to envision this. And we'll talk a little more about that, but let's bring in Kat. How you doing, Fofo Kat?
I'm good. How are you, Mike?
It is so good to see you. And I want you all to know now, Kate and her father and I have had the chance to work together for a lot of years. He's former Secret Service and is a guy that I just absolutely love. But I have actually been punishing you and making you listen to some things on the side, right?
It's not a punishment.
But anyway, tell me what your thoughts are on this Alex Murdaugh case.
So actually, what you were just touching on about how they brought it all together at the end. But I really think that they could have been more effective in how they presented all that information. And I was thinking back to the story maps that you have on the Profiling Evo website, because I felt like, yes, they put it in a linear fashion, but I go back and I look at those maps and then I have to go back and I have to find the information instead of pulling it all together. And it's still just, it doesn't feel like they've created a narrative that's easy enough to follow or that it's convincing enough, especially if I were a juror, that I would be convinced enough that he was the one that did it. I think that they've kind of let a lot of loose ends still hang.
Interesting. So, and the cool part about the criminal justice system from a prosecution standpoint is the prosecution gets to lead out and bait the jury and let them understand what the case is and all of the powerful information, so they can get all the really heavy stuff out of the way. Because once the defense does their thing, then they're going to have an opportunity to argue. They're the last one that gets to argue when this thing goes to the jury. So hopefully at that point, that's when they'll paint a much clearer picture of, hey, remember when we had on Paul Murdaugh's friend who said that was Alex Murdaugh's voice on the video, or Alex Murdaugh's two other friends that said that was his voice on the video. And do you remember him saying that right after Alex, you watched him say, I was never there during that time. You know, so that's when they can really start to lay it out and hopefully make this thing really make common sense. Because what you want to do when that jury walks into the jury room is paint a picture in their mind where they're going, holy cow, yeah, this all makes sense.
Yeah, I feel like they have all those puzzle pieces and maybe they've started put them together, but I think that they could have presented them in a way that made it where the jury could start putting the puzzle pieces together more at the beginning, so that they weren't sitting there for 3 weeks now and being like, what is going on? Can we please figure this out? So I feel like they have not been effective in, at least, I don't know, making the correlations until the very end in the last few days. So I feel like they had so many great pieces there. And also that they didn't let a lot of the witnesses finish what they wanted to say. That could have been powerful with Michelle and with Blanca and with the sister as well.
So folks, as I say goodbye to Kate here and keep this thing moving, I'm going to ask you to weigh in and say whether you think that the prosecution is doing their job in trying to bring this forward. Kate, before we say goodnight, anything else you want to chat about real quickly?
No, but I thought you did a great job on Nancy Grace.
Oh, well, a lot of people hammer me on that. Every time I go on with Nancy, I get people saying, I'm not going to come on again ever, or I'm not going to watch you anymore. And I'm like, oh, okay, my goal is pretty simple. It's to to try to share some ideas on whatever platform that makes sense to do it. So anyway, it's great. Well,
I
thanks.
enjoyed
Have a
it.
great
You
night.
did a
It's
great
sure
job.
good to see you.
You too. Good to see
Thank you.
too.
Bye. At DC Primetime, thank you so much. The prosecution nailed it in her opinion. Alex put that wild dog down, and the Murdaugh name, the way of life, was more valuable to Alex when the chips were down. Wow. Thanks for that super chat. And gosh, folks, thanks. Make sure you're hitting the like and subscribe button. Make sure you're giving the thumbs up. I think if I'm reading this right, out of 2,000 people, there are only 2 thumbs up on tonight's live, something that I don't do very often. So encourage me a little and hit the thumbs up. But let's jump back into this. Talk about what was discussed in court, starting obviously with June 7th. And that's when testimony came out that Alex Murdaugh had asked his wife to meet with him at the Moselle property in Colton County. Now, hey folks, sorry about that. I couldn't hear any audio coming out of the video just then, so I'm going to click it back on and see if Alex knew it. There we go. Or not. Now we're back in business. Before all of this happened, Alex also received about that same time word that his father was entering into hospice, so he was nearing death. That doesn't mean he was dying. I mean, my mother was on hospice for 8 months before she died. In many cases, people will go on hospice and actually get better and have to come off hospice. And so, again, I don't put a whole lot of stock on that, other than we know that his father died, and obviously he was near death. Now, again, folks, this is my personal opinion based on things that I've heard throughout the 3 weeks of the trial. But most importantly, on June 7th, Alex was confronted by his law firm for stealing money from the firm and from their clients. Now, the question became whether all of this is what set in motion the murders, hoping that he could somehow shift attention from him and his theft of millions over to being a victim of this horror where his wife and son were murdered. Again, this is going to be interesting to see what the decision is in the long run. Now, let's talk a little bit about the forensic examination of his vehicle, because it happened in 2 buckets. At first, it was that investigator from the FBI who had to go in and tear those logs apart. Later, GM, just a few days ago, came back and said, look, we'll give you even more information now that we know about this, which is leaving me wondering, did they ever even ask GM? Which seems to be like the quickest question you'd ask. But nonetheless, a forensic examination of Murdaugh's vehicle showed that the vehicle, assumedly with him driving, left the Moselle property en route to their law firm over in Hampton. Now, the time was about 12:06 p.m., and it took him about 18 minutes to get to the law firm. Now, he was at the law firm for a little while, but at 3:28 p.m., the Murdaugh housekeeper texted Maggie and told her that dinner was on the stove for her, Paul, and Alex. Now, Maggie was over in Charleston area, and Maggie responded about 12 minutes later, thanking the housekeeper and indicating that she'd head home. It was about a minute after that Alex Murdaugh actually FaceTimed Maggie, but she didn't answer the call. Now, a South Carolina investigator would later testify in court that Alex Murdaugh actually removed that FaceTime call from his device, although it was still recorded on Maggie's. This seems to be a recurring theme where phone calls were on other people's phones from Alex Murdaugh, but they were erased from his phone. And I'll let you be the judge of why that's happening. Now, some other interesting testimony that came out in court was the testimony of Roger Dale Davis. Now, this guy is a character. He's a local guy who was hired by the Murdaughs to feed their dogs and their chickens. His main responsibility was to go in every day, twice a day, I believe, and clean the kennels and make sure that the dogs had water and that everything was fine. Now, this guy testified that he arrived at the property around 4 p.m. and he was there for about a half hour. He was the only one there in his testimony, and everything seemed to be in place, nothing out of order. Now, he later testified that when he saw some of the evidence around the scene, that somebody had been there after he had been there. And he testified that he would wind the hose a very specific way, and the hose wasn't that way after. He also noted there was water in the kennels, which he would not have left. So the indication was that someone, presumably Alex, used that hose after the murders to either hose themselves off or clean up the crime scene. Now, I want to just stop there for a minute because I don't know Davis at all. Just watching, I kind of got the sense this guy is pretty obsessive compulsive in the way that he does things. And that's why that hose became so important. And I wish that the prosecution would have spent a little more time talking about the fact that that would have driven him crazy. In fact, it reminded me of at one time I was interviewing a serial predator who was obsessive compulsive. And if I can, I'm going to just do a little example here to show you. And while I was in the interview, one of the strategies I came up with was that I didn't want him to know where I was going on the questioning. And, oftentimes these predators are just really good at what they do. And so I'm going to do this so you can see this. Now, keep in mind, this guy was obsessive compulsive. So everything on his desk, and think about people that might be like this. Everything on his desk was perfectly laid out. If there was a book on the desk, there was a pen laying perfectly lined up next to it. The stacks of paper were all perfectly kept together. And I chose to interview him in a location where I could have everything lined out perfectly. I had the cassette recorder laid out perfectly. I had a pen and a pad laid out perfectly. Everything made him comfortable because everything had its place and everything was in its place. And then as we were talking, I just started asking him questions, and I just was doing this while we were talking. And every time I tore a piece of paper off, that guy could only think of one thing. And what do you think it was? It was, what on earth is he doing, and why is this thing out of order? And it completely fouled up his line of thinking, where we could start to get admissions, not necessarily confessions. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because in just a second, we're going to talk about how Alex, he didn't make any confessions, but he sure talked to cops a lot. And you know what? I think he made some admissions. Let's jump back in. Now, just 5 minutes before Davis was arriving to clean up at 4 p.m., Maggie was sending texts to her sister and to another acquaintance saying that she was at the doctor's office, but that Alec wanted her to come home. She also indicated that he was under a lot of pressure because of his ailing father and mother. Forensically, Alex appeared to be at the law firm until about 6:25 p.m. And about that same time, Maggie's phone is placing her somewhere in that West Ashley area around up to about 7:05 p.m. Now, during this same time frame, Paul Murdaugh's phone puts him in Okatee up until about 6:09 p.m. And about 6:04, Paul's calling his friends, who return his call in just a matter of seconds. And this guy was on top of his social media and phone calls. That's why Alec was carrying the phone. And that phone records about 59 steps, which they assume is him walking to the vehicle. At 9:02 p.m., Murdaugh's phone is reactivated, and it shows him walking about 900 feet. That's 3 football fields. Alex, during that time, calls Maggie, and 2 minutes later, the call's recorded on Maggie's phone, but it's erased from Alex's phone. Now, hey, folks, are you okay with all these? Because this case is really a forensic gem, because every call, every text, every GPS location of that vehicle becomes critical in it. I was really worried when I was putting this thing together that I was doing a whole bunch of yapping about a whole bunch of different times. So I hope you're okay. I'm going to be looking for your comments in there, and we'll keep going. It's believed at this time that Murdaugh gets into his vehicle and drives to his mother's house. Now, his vehicle is forensically tracked along the same route where Maggie's missing phone is found. In fact, the vehicle is seen accelerating rapidly by those forensics just at the point where that phone is thrown out the window. And if you get a minute, go back and watch my my video about whether that phone was thrown like a frisbee or flopped end over end through the sky. Now, during this drive, Alec is texting Maggie saying that he's gone to check on his mother. And it's during this drive that Alec is also believed to be communicating with his longtime friend, Chris Wilson, a man that he defrauded hundreds of thousands of dollars from. He also is calling John Murdaugh, and those calls also get extracted from Murdaugh's phone records. Now, interestingly, forensic vehicle information shows that Murdaugh's vehicle traveled to his mother's home at about 9:22, but it pauses halfway up the driveway, parking by a wood line away from the house for a bit. I want to stop there for just a second. Now, what Murdaugh has done is he's driven from the crime scene, and he's supposedly thrown that phone out the window of his vehicle. So I guess my first question is, did he throw it like a frisbee, or did he throw it end over end like the prosecutor or the defense was trying to suggest created the motion on the phone? I'm going to let you decide that. But Sniper Logic says, hey, I thought he slowed down at the phone, not sped up. Maybe I wasn't really clear when I was mentioning this, Sniper Logic, but what the data shows is that he sped up after the location where the phone was thrown. So I would suspect you're probably pretty accurate that he slowed down first and then hit the gas. So we'll see, and we'll get back into this. But again, thanks everybody. Thanks for these super chats. It's always helpful to get that. And thanks for just being here tonight. It's kind of fun to get together. I don't do it very often, and it's just very gratifying that y'all would show up. If you're not a member of Profiling Evil, please hit that like and subscribe button. We're almost at 150,000, so that's pretty exciting on the subscription list. But anyway, let's get here. I'm going to pop this up first. I thought Murdaugh wasn't guilty until the OnStar information. You know, I think the thing that was so creative and beautiful about the OnStar data was that the FBI examiner came in and said, hey, we did our best. We tried to put this together, and here's what we believe happened. And the timeline was established. And then GM came back and said, hey, we figured out how to get you this data. And the data has done nothing but support that forensic examination and has moved this case along. So yeah, this is a pretty exciting forensic case. That he was under a lot of pressure because of his ailing father and mother at the crime scene when Paul and Maggie are killed. And sorry, folks, I hit the wrong button and kind of backtracked this a little bit, so I'm back on track. Facing this reality of the big lie, because again, remember, he told the investigators he was nowhere to be found when those two were murdered. In fact, he says he woke up from a little nap, texted him, said, I'm running to check on Mom, and he left. Well, it's believed that somewhere in the next 10 minutes, up to about 8:50 p.m., the murders occur. Now, Paul gets shot twice with a shotgun, once in the chest and once in the head. Can you imagine? And then Maggie is shot 5 times with a .300 Blackout. This is an AR-style rifle. 2 of the shots to Maggie were in the head. And I really think Maggie was probably the primary target, and that Paul happened to stumble into the scene. It's just my personal feeling on this. Now at 8:53 p.m., the orientation on Maggie's phone changes, indicated by the screen waking up, looking for that face recognition on the screen, but the phone remains locked, implying that it was somebody other than Maggie that picked up the phone. Now, it's believed that Maggie's dead at this point. So the prosecution is alleging that Alec was carrying the phone, and that phone records about 59 steps, which they assume is him walking to the vehicle. At 9:02 p.m., Murdaugh's phone is reactivated, and it shows him walking about 900 feet. That's 3 football fields. Alex, during that time, calls Maggie and 2 minutes later, the call's recorded on Maggie's phone, but it's erased from Alex's phone. And again, it's believed at this time that Murdaugh gets into his vehicle and drives to his mother's house. Now, his vehicle is forensically tracked along the same route where Maggie's missing phone is found. In fact, the vehicle is seen accelerating rapidly by those forensics just at the point where that phone is thrown out the window. And if you get a minute, go back and watch my my video about whether that phone was thrown like a frisbee or flopped end over end through the sky. Now, during this drive, Alec is texting Maggie saying that he's gone to check on his mother.
And I'm really sorry,
it's
folks.
during
I
this
think
drive
we
that
have
Alec
already
is also
covered this
believed to
piece
be
of it, so I'm going to
communicating
bounce
with his
just a hair
longtime
ahead.
friend. Now, Murdaugh's caretaker, Shelley Smith, then testified in court that Murdaugh spent a lot of time while he was in the home on the phone, and she loses track of him. Of course, she testified to him coming in with that blue tarp that she thought it actually was a coat, I believe, and that he was in different clothing. Now, she later says that she thinks that he tries to convince her that he stayed at the home longer than he actually did. And folks, I want to just kind of clarify. I'm not exactly sure that she thinks he changed clothes, or whether I got that from just the fact that we see him in one set of clothes prior to the murders and then wearing shorts after the murders when he's interviewed. It's then, though, 9:43 p.m., that Alex's car goes in and out of park a couple of times. And then there's this 19 minutes between that time that he's there. Now the caretaker says that he tried to get her to say that he was there for about 40 minutes or so. So you go back and watch that and listen to that a little closer. Now, Murdaugh makes a number of calls and texts to Paul and Maggie and some others. That information remains on their phones, but again, it's wiped from Murdaugh's phone. Now, I want to stop there long enough to answer Helen's question, because I thought this was just an incredibly interesting question. In America, you will go to the same prison for financial crimes as someone who commits murder. You'll be segregated into different areas of the prison based on risk levels and whether the correctional institution is fearful for your life. But that's in state charges. But if it's a federal charge, you're going to end up in a federal prison. So it's the same prison for everybody. I hope that helped out on that. And let's just see here. A couple of other things. Yeah, the housekeeper said she made green beans for dinner, but none in their stomach. Now, I got that the housekeeper actually made chicken fried steak and macaroni and cheese, just an American. So, and I think I got that from the trial. So I'd be interested in what others say and where maybe you got that. So yeah, I don't know. Kathy, thanks. I'm glad you're enjoying this. Again, I always kind of wonder what the best thing is to do on a live. And some people are really good at it, and others like me just kind of hope that I can get through it without embarrassing myself or my family. So we'll see. Let's jump back in. 9:54 p.m. Forensics show Murdaugh's car is racing back toward Moselle and speeds excess of 74 miles an hour. He arrives around 9:56 p.m. where the phone records him walking around before getting into his vehicle and driving over to the main house at 10 p.m. Now, one estimate said the forensic evidence put him traveling as much as 80 miles an hour. Those roads are a maximum speed limit of 55, so he was in a hurry getting over there. Now, at 10:01, he put his vehicle in and out of park about 3 or more times, finally putting it in park by the kennels at 10:05 p.m. At 10:06 p.m., Murdaugh makes his 911 call, and there he makes it from the Moselle property, about a 7-minute call, when he says he found Maggie and Paul shot and that neither of them were breathing. Now, instead of staying with his murdered wife and son, apparently he jumps back into his vehicle and drives to the main house at 10:11 p.m., and he returns to the kennels about 10:14 p.m. So, I mean, this makes pretty good sense. He makes the 911 call about 10:06 p.m. It was a 7-minute call. So those are all coming pretty good. Now he starts calling his family and friends and waits for police to arrive. But by the time police actually question him a little more in depth, he's surrounded by a house full of lawyers, all advising him not to talk to police. But in his arrogance, I guess, he chooses to talk to police. Or it might be in his innocence, he chooses to talk to police. This makes me wonder if this guy's going to testify in his own behalf in this trial. Nonetheless, he talks to police 3 times. Now, I thought it was interesting the wide range of responses that I've received about the defense attorney and the aggressive way in which he was questioning that last sled agent on that last day of the prosecution's case. The defense, in my opinion, was extremely argumentative and aggressive. I've been the witness having a defense attorney attack like that. It actually, as I matured and learned more about the system, made me feel really comfortable that their case was so weak that they were trying to attack me as an investigator or my investigative strategies rather than being able to attack the case evidence. So I find a lot of hope and I find a lot of value when a defense attorney actually does that. But I think when a defense attorney is this aggressive, it could really backfire on them. Now, I've heard from some of you, though, that you felt like this sled agent was evasive and you felt like he was a hostile witness. So I want to know what your thoughts are on this one, and I hope you'll put your answers down below. And I wondered if you noticed how the prosecution wrapped up their case by showing the jury a text from Paul Murdaugh to his dad, Alec. He was telling him that his mother, or Alex Murdaugh's wife, Maggie, had discovered several bags of pills that Alex had hidden in his computer bag. Now, the prosecutor also showed where Maggie had been doing computer searches trying to figure out what kind of pills they were. I think that certainly left the jury with a whole lot to consider over the 3-day weekend. But let me tell you what, on Tuesday morning, I expect the defense to come out swinging. I mean, remember, folks, they only have to convince one jury member that Alex Murdaugh is innocent of this murder. And if they do, the guy walks free. So, what are your thoughts after the first 3 weeks of Alex Murdaugh's murder trial? I'm going to be looking for your answers down below, and I hope you'll take time to record them. Hey, be respectful with each other, but make sure you're weighing in on what others have to say about the case, because I think together we can really have some great conversation and we can learn together. Hey, I just want to shout out JLL. Thank you so much for this kind super chat. And folks, thanks for just the awesome way you handle things in the chat. We tried early on at Profiling Evil to just kind of get used to taking a higher road, and you all do it all the time, and it's really fun. Even when we disagree, you're decent with each other. So thanks a lot for all of that. It really does mean a lot to me. And let's just see if there's a couple of questions here that you might want to chat a little bit. Yeah, I mean, the defense attorney was really aggressive with the sled agent toward the end. Was the sled agent being a little bit combative? Maybe so. But you're taught as a police officer to keep your answers very concise, and to when you're being kind of hammered by a defense attorney, it's usually a sign that you're on target and they're trying to come up with something to get people thinking that you're not on target. And what better way to think that the evidence is bad if they can somehow convince the jury that you are bad? And so that didn't bother me too much. I thought it was kind of interesting. And you folks are weighing in. It's kind of neat to see some of your thoughts. And please keep putting them in here as we talk about a few final points here. And thanks so much for being here tonight, folks. I hope you'll hit the like and subscribe button. Send me some information if you have some critiques for me. I'm always willing to evolve and adjust. And if the critiques are don't call people out, then I can't help you there, because I just am so appreciative of what all of you do to help us in what we're trying to do. And to the people that called in tonight, thanks a lot. It was really fun to have you jump on for a moment and spend some time. And I suspect Alex has a batch of money to pay for his attorneys, even though he was getting into real trouble, whether it was through leveraging property or whatever else. So we'll see. Carol, we'll see if you're right at the end of the day. That will be interesting. I think I'm kind of joining the lead of everyone else. I think that the prosecution's going to come full circle on this one after the defense is done. But I'll tell you what, it is going to be a wacky week coming up. And take a moment and indicate what your vote would be today if you were sitting on the jury. Do you think Alex Murdaugh is guilty or not guilty? I'm going to be looking for your answers down below. Please take time to do that. And thanks for supporting Profiling Evil. I hope you'll take a moment, hit that like and subscribe button, and ring the bell. Hey, make sure that you're sharing Profiling Evil with all of your friends. Your support really helps us grow. And I hope you're hitting that thumbs up button, because that helps us on the algorithms as well. And if you'd like to support Profiling Evil financially, consider joining our channel memberships. You can join those by going over to the join button. And my favorite, frankly, is the Academy level, where you get a whole lot more information a little ahead of anybody else. And I really think you'd like seeing the 16 new videos on criminal behavior that we dropped the last couple of weeks. They're only available, at least for the next 4 months or so, to channel members in the Profiling Evil Academy level. Hey, there's also other ways to donate. You can donate by just putting money in super chats, or you can go to our PayPal account at Profiling Evil, or just go to profilingevil.com and hit the donate button. Now listen, here's the question. Do you think Alex Murdaugh, his secret life, took front and center stage over his decision making? And it was his secret life that led to all the decisions that allegedly have made him a murderer. I'm going to be looking for your answers below. Remember, you can find Profiling Evil on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter. And if you like podcasts, make sure you're checking out Profiling Evil podcasts on your favorite podcast platform. Hey, thanks again, and we'll see you all soon at the next crime scene.